All right, last regular test of the semester. We'll look at the practice test here. Number one, it says choose the term that best matches the given definition. We've got a subset of a particular group of interest in a statistical study. Okay, so since it says a subset, if it said the whole group that we were interested in, that would be a population, but since it says a subset, then we'll be looking at a sample here. If it said a number that describes a subset, that would be sample statistic, or if it said a number that describes a whole population or a whole group of interest, that would be a population parameter. But this one just says what do I call the subset of a particular group of interest, so that is a sample. Number two is choose the term that best matches the given definition. We're talking about the different types of sampling here. So we want to know a sample in which every nth member of the population is selected. So if we have some rule like we're going to pick every 7th person we come across, and then that's been very systematic. So that is a systematic sample. A convenient sample is when you just pick a sample that is convenient. A random sample is when it's completely random. And a stratified sample is when you collect, you split your data up into groups and you collect some data from, you take a sample from each one of the little subgroups. That would be stratified. Okay. Number three, let's zoom in a little bit. Number three says 4 scenarios of statistical studies are given below. Decide which study uses a population parameter. So we're looking for which one of these gives us a number that tells us about the whole population, the whole group that's being studied. Okay. Part A says in a study of 89 of the children diagnosed with cancer at Leland Memorial Hospital, 70 children were cancer-free 5 years after its first diagnosis. Okay, so this is not telling us about the whole population. The population here would be all the children diagnosed with cancer at Leland Memorial Hospital, but this is just doing a study of 89, so this is not a population parameter. Okay, so not A. B says the National Institute of Pediatric Dentistry reports that 42% of children ages 2 to 11 have had at least one cavity. Okay, this is telling us about all children aged 2 to 11. So that is our population. The number's describing the population, so our answer here is B, but we can look at the other two. Part C says as part of her senior project, Casa, I don't know, asked 84 of her classmates if they voted in the last presidential election. 39 said yes. But it doesn't tell us that 84 is all of her classmates, so this is not telling us about the whole population, so not C. And then D says of 351 dog owners who were surveyed, 70 reported owning 2 dogs. And there are more than 351 dog owners in the world, so that's not telling us about every dog owner, so that one's not a population parameter. The only one that tells us about the whole group that's being studied is B. Okay. Number 4 says identify the sampling technique that's being used. We're told a local news agency is interested in studying unemployment rates across the state. The researchers will randomly select 1,000 people from each state county and gather all relevant data from those selected. Okay, so this one can be a little bit confusing here. It's not random because they're not being random about it. Okay. Stratified sounds kind of like that. Cluster sounds kind of like that. It's not systematic because they're not picking every 10th person or something like that. And it's not convenience because they're not just picking people based on how easy they are to get to. Okay, so the tricky part here is the difference between stratified and cluster. So stratified sampling is when we split our data up into subgroups, and then we pick like some people, we take like a sample from each one of the subgroups. Okay, so that's stratified. Cluster sampling is when we split our data into subgroups. And then we pick like, we say we're going to take everybody from group 1 and everybody from group 4. That would be cluster. Okay, so what's going on here? It says they're picking 1,000 people from each county. Okay, so this one is going to be stratified. If it said they were going to pick 3 counties and survey all the people in those 3 counties, that would be cluster. Okay, so this one's not cluster. Those are the 2 that are easy to get confused. Okay, number 5. Says the grades on the second statistics test for Mr. Rose's class are in the following list. Complete the frequency distribution table for the grades. So all we're doing is we're counting how many of each one of these grades we have. So we're looking for A's first. So there's 1, 2 for A's. Now we're looking for B's. So it's 1, 1B. Now we're counting C's. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 C's. Now we'll do D's. So 1, 2, 3, 4 D's. And what we have left are F's. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 F's. Must have been a pretty hard test. It had more F's than anything. And so all we're doing for frequency distribution is we're counting how many data values belong to each category. Number 6 is the following table represents a grouped frequency distribution of the number of hours spent on the computer per week for 52 students. What percentage of students use the computer between 18 and 24 or 22.4 hours per week? And we can round our answer to 1 decimal place. So a couple of things to take note of. It says what percentage. So we got to change our answer to a percent. And then the category we want is between 18 and 22.4 hours. So that's that row. Okay, and then it also helps us out by telling us the total. We could figure out the total by adding all the, like the 5, 19, 13, 11, and 4 all together. But it helps us out. It goes ahead and gives us the total, so it saves us that step. So here the number of students in this category are 4 out of the 52 students in total. So we got to change that to a percent. So we do 4 divided by 52 as a decimal. We get 0.07692 on and on and on. But then we want to change it to a decimal, to a percentage. So we move our decimal place 2 places. We end up with 7 point. It says we can round to 1 decimal place, so that 6 will round up to a 7%. So about 7.7% there. Okay, number 7. Just reading some graphs on the next few. Says the bar graph shows the profits or losses for a small retail store in its first year of operation. Use the graph to determine the number of months in which the store had a profit. If you look at the graph, this is 0. So if the bar goes up from there, that's a profit. If the bar goes down from there, that's a loss. So how many do we have where we have a profit? We got this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. So we have 5 months where we had a profit. So hopefully that one's pretty easy to you. It's just reading the graph. 8, another graph reading problem. And it says the following line graph shows the price of a stock over the previous 2 weeks. Use the graph to determine the number of days in which the price was between $70 and $80. And so what we're looking at, we're looking between $70 and $80. So let's see how many days our price was in there. We had 1, 2, 3, 4 days. 4 days it was between $70 and $80. And just take your time on these, don't rush, and you'll be good. Number 9 is find the mean of the following data set. Round our answer to the nearest hundredth. That's 2 decimal places. So to find the mean, that's probably what you're used to calling the average. So we're just going to add all of our data up. It takes longer to write it down than it does to actually punch it in the calculator. We're just adding all of our data, and then we're going to divide by how many we have. Okay, so let's see what we get there. 20 plus 33 plus 16 plus 22 plus 26 plus 23 plus 23 plus 29 plus 28 plus 28 plus 27 gives us 275. And then we count how many we had. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 data values. So 275 divided by 11. We get 25. We didn't have to round there, so we can leave our answer just like that. Okay. Number 10 says calculate the 5-number summary of the data. So if we're going to do the 5-number summary, the first thing we have to do is put our data in order. Okay, so make sure you take your time putting these in order, and as you write them down, you can cross them off. Say, well, the smallest one I see is 2. Then I'll write down 2. And then I'll look through and I'll say the next one I see is 3. So I'll write down 3. And you can do that as you write the data down. I've already put mine in order on my piece of paper I'm using here. Just so you don't have to wait on me to pick through all these, but make sure you take your time on the putting them in order part, because it will mess you up if you miss one or something like that. Let's see. And then I'll show you one other thing to do to check and make sure it's worked out okay. Okay, when you think you've got them all, and you've gone through and you've crossed them, make sure you got them all crossed out. Okay, and then go through and count. Okay, so what I did is I counted, I said on my list I have 14. Then I go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right, and count, make sure I have 14 on the list. Okay, so just easy little things to make sure to kind of minimize the chances of you missing one and making a mistake. Okay, so now if we want the 5-number summary, the first thing we need to do is find the median, or the middle number. Okay, so if you look, we've got 2 numbers in the middle. And so if you count from each end, then those are both 7 in. So what I do is I put my finger on the 2 and on the 22, and then I'll put my finger on the 3 and then 21, and then I'm making my screen go crazy, but that's what I do. And then you count and find out where you're at in the middle. So if you only have one number in the middle, like if you start with an odd number of data values, the one in the middle is the median. But here, we gotta do something a little different, because we've got 2 middle numbers. We gotta add them together and divide by 2. So here we get 25 divided by 2. We do that, our middle number is 12.5, and that is what we call Q2, our second quartile, or our median. Okay, that's part of our 5-number summary. So the 5-number summary is the minimum, Q1, Q2, Q3, and the maximum. You remember doing the quartiles. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to split the data in half. And then we're going to find the median for each one of those pieces. So the middle on the left side is 6. That's Q1. The middle on the right side is 19. That's Q3. So the only other number I'm missing is the minimum and the maximum. So the minimum is 2. The maximum is 22. So when I list these out, my 5-number summary is 2, 6, 12.5, 19, and 22. My 5-number summary here. Okay. Number 11. Got a little bit of the financial stuff. So it says Zoe has a job where she has a take-home salary each month of $3,100. If she wants to spend no more than 25% of her monthly take-home salary on rent, how much can she afford? So here we just need to figure out what 25% or 0.25 is of her take-home salary, $3,100. Okay, so if we do 0.25 times 3,100, get $775. That's the most she can spend on rent each month. Okay. 12, and I will give you a formula sheet with all the formulas you need. So these are the formulas printed out from Hawks here. It says a couple deposits $16,000 into an account earning 3% annual interest for 20 years. Calculate the future value of the investment if the interest is compounded quarterly. So since it's compounded some number of times per year, it says quarterly, it means we're going to use the compound interest formula. It also helps because it says future value, and that's another name for that formula is future value. So we're trying to figure out how much they end up with, A. So that's going to be our principal, our starting amount, $16,000, times 1 plus, then we need our interest rate, which is 3%, but we got to change it to a decimal, so 0.03. And then it says it compounded quarterly, so the times it's compounded a year is where we get our n, so quarterly means 4 times a year, so n will be 4. And then we're going to raise this to the 4 times how many years are we doing it for? We're doing it for 20 years. You punch this in your calculator. I'm going to do parenthesis 1 plus 0.03 divided by 4, close parenthesis, the exponent of 80, 4 times 20, and then times 16,000. I get $29,088. It says round to the nearest cent, so we have 70 cents. Okay, but you should get there. Okay. 13 is determine the simple interest. So here's our formula. Okay, earned on, so we want the simple interest earned on our starting amount of $10,000. It's P. Our APR, our interest rate, is 12%, and we have to change that to a decimal, so 0.12. And then T, 20 years. So there's our PRT. Now we punch that in our calculator, 10,000 times 0.12 times 20. The interest we will earn is $24,000. Number 14. Suppose your salary in 2015 is $60,000. If the annual inflation rate is 3%, what salary do you need to make in 2023 in order for it to keep up with inflation? Okay, so we're trying to figure out future value here. This one can be a little tricky to pick out the formula, but it's not simple interest. We're not even using this one, and it doesn't say APY, so it's going to be compound interest again. If you get stuck on figuring out which formula to use, a good guess is the compound interest formula. So here we're trying to figure out how much we need to make in the future to keep up with our starting salary of $60,000. Times 1 plus the interest rate is 3%, so 0.03. It says this is annual, so n is going to be 1. N's 1 there again also, and then we're going from 2023, or from 2015 to 2023. That is going to be 8 years, so 1 times 8. Okay. So I'm going to do 1 plus 0.03. Since it's over 1, you don't have to do anything there. And then I'm going to raise that to the 8th power. And then do times 60,000. If you want to punch it in a different order, that's okay. So what I get here is $76,006.20. $15. Suppose $17,000 is deposited for 5 years at 3% APR. Calculate the interest earned if interest is compounded semi-annually. The only thing that's different on this is it doesn't say calculate the total we're going to end up with. It just says calculate the interest earned. Okay? So that's going to add one more step to our problem here, but it also says they're compounded semi-annually, so we're using compound interest. So we're starting with $17,000 times 1 plus our interest rate is 3% again, 0.03. Divided by, it says compounded semi-annually, that's twice a year. So N is going to be 2. Then we've got 2 times, says 5 years. 2 times 5 will go up here. So if we punch that in our calculator, I'm going to do parenthesis 1 plus 0.03 divided by 2, close parenthesis. I'm going to raise that to the 10th power, and times 17,000. Okay, so I get $19,729.19, but that's the total amount we'll end up with after 5 years. Again, we just want the interest. So how do we get that? We just subtract how much we started with. So we started with 17,000. So what's that give us? $2,729.19 is our interest. So keep an eye out for if it asks for the total or for just the interest. Okay. Number 16. I think this is the last one. Yep, 16 is the last one. It says RET deposits $3,000. Determine the APY, so that already tells us what formula to use. If there's an APR of 8.5%, compounded semi-annually means twice a year. And then round your answer to the nearest 100th of a percent, so that's 2 decimal places. So for APY, we're going to do 1 plus the interest rate, so 8.5% is 0.085 divided by n, which we said was 2, to the 2nd power minus 1. And whatever we get there, we're going to multiply by 100, and our answer will be a percentage. So I'm going to do parenthesis 1 plus 0.085 divided by 2, close parenthesis. I'm going to square that. Right, 1. So here I'm getting, you don't have to write this down, but I'm just wanting to give you a reference to what I get here. I got that number on my calculator, and then I do times 100. So I get 8. If we round to 2 decimal places, 8.68. And this is a percentage. So our APY, annual percentage yield, is 8.68%. Okay. Work on the practice test. If you have any questions, let me know.